Welcome, Tatiana. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I'd like to get us started just so we get a little bit of a richer understanding of your background. So I was wondering if you could tell us about your journey in digital humanities and into your current role, and what kind of work you're doing in your current role.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And thanks for this question, because it requires that I really kind of think back and search my memory. So I started learning about digital humanities when I worked at NYU Libraries, and that was over a decade ago. I was doing reference and instruction in our Humanities and Social Sciences Center. And so there was an active push for library staff to kind of skill up and learn more about DH. And that was part of my portfolio there as well. I was in grad school at the time, and I was focused on cultural heritage preservation while I was at Pratt. I started off by reading some of the scholarship that had been published. I started following blogs written by digital humanists. And I got my feet wet a bit when I attended an NEH Digital Humanities Symposium in DC and learned about the projects that they funded. That really kind of like really sped my interest. I started attending VAC camps, which were organized by Amanda French. And eventually I hosted my own VAC camp. I hosted VAC Camp New York in 2012 with the support of Amanda French, and that was co-sponsored by NYU Libraries, CUNY, Hunter College, as well as Fordham University. So I was able to connect with others there who had an interest in hosting a digital humanities on conference and work with them to put that together. And that was about 80 or so people from around New York attending that camp. I left NYU Libraries for the University of Oregon, and I started working in special collections. I became a digital NEIS fellow, so Native American Indigenous Studies fellow. So I was able to connect with a cohort of scholars, students, technologists, DH people who are interested in digital NEIS specifically, and thinking through how to create digital projects that ethically from the beginning. While at University of Oregon, I became more connected to the DH community. I started to attend DLF, the Digital Library Federation. So they have an annual forum every fall. I attended DHSI in Victoria and took workshops there. I also attended HILT, which was really helpful. So my goal was to scale up and be a part of the larger community. Based on my own interest in Black digital humanities, specifically, while I was at my next university, I developed a course that I had planned to teach for an LAS grad student audience. But I was invited to teach for the first year experience program at my university. So I decided to adapt that course for first year students. And I presented that work at CADHRI. And then after that, I started developing some of my own digital projects, and those are some of those projects are portable, so I've taken them with me. When the position at University of California, Irvine opened up, and there was a focus on history and DH, I was really excited about the possibility of really just focusing on the DH portion of my work. And I was excited to work there with the faculty, the library staff, and the students. So at the University of California, Irvine, I worked with a team across the libraries, across the Humanities Center, across the School of Humanities and beyond, to collaborate on public programs, to advise and develop digital projects, and to really think about how to support the life cycle of DH more fully. There were projects that were brought in by public scholars to UC Irvine that I was able to connect with, and then there are homegrown projects created by faculty that I was able to contribute to as well, in tangible ways. So I'll stop there, but I can also talk about some of the work I did with faculty and some of the projects I collaborated on in more depth.
Yeah, thank you so much. What strikes me listening to you talk is sort of how so many of us of a certain era weren't actually really trained in our graduate programs in digital humanities. And so we had to really go around and sort of piece together these sort of different opportunities we could apply for institutes like HILT or DHSI. And that, it's not like we had, could just go to grad school and somebody's like, here's how you do digital humanities. But it was really this experience of, we're sort of figuring it out. And that should hopefully be a comfort for our community members who are relatively new to digital humanities, to know that, even those of us who've sort of been working in the field for longer, we got started in the same way that you're getting started, generally. So I think it's important to highlight that. It's sort of, in a way, I wish there was somewhere I could go where somebody just tell me how to do digital humanities and what it is, but.
I think that there are now like a few programs, certificates that, have people behind them and some infrastructure. So you can go places and learn that, but it's people who are interested in it, creating it really at their own institutions or for themselves. Working in libraries, in academic libraries in particular, and having that, that's part of the functional work of the job, needing to skill up in various things and understand various things about digital scholarship, scholarly communications, how the fields we are connected to are advancing. And so that's where a lot of that, I feel like pressure is the wrong word, but a lot of the influence to learn more came from initially. And I have a BA in history, and I really just fell in love with what I was learning, what I was finding.
This is why I love working with librarians. I've always collaborated with librarians, whether I was at Salem State. All our work building digital humanities initiatives was in collaboration with two librarians, Susan Edwards, the University Archivist, and Justin Snow, the digital initiatives librarian, who Susan and I kind of schemed to turn that open line into a digital initiatives librarian line so we could have somebody to play with. And it's that collaboration is so valuable, and it's just I've just loved and really been inspired by that very sort of skilling up, professional development, learn new things driven approach that my librarian collaborators bring to the conversation. Because often, I think, and I have a PhD in English, right? And so I've been, taught, you've learned the thing and now you know the thing, and go forth. And granted, they didn't actually teach me how to do any of it. I have literally no idea how to do literary analysis, but getting to work with people who have this mindset around, like, we can go figure it out, we're going to learn new things, is just so wonderful in a collaboration. I'd love to hear, you said you could tell us a little bit more about your work with faculty with the California Digital Humanities Research Institute and the kinds of projects you're working on. I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And I also encourage everyone who's here, please post your questions in the chat or raise your hand and participate in the Q&A.
Yes, I'll give some background for the California Digital Humanities Research Institute. I'm going to call it Cali DHRI for short. So Cali DHRI was something that was created in like 2021. I became a CUNY Digital Humanities Research Institute Fellow in 2021. And that fellowship involved working with CUNY administrators, faculty, grad students who kind of deployed a train the trainer model for librarians and faculty who are interested in learning kind of basic DH methods and tools like command line, Git, Python, GIS, enough so that they can bring it to their own institutions and recreate the institute at their own institutions. And as part of that work, as part of being a fellow, I was supported to develop my own DHRI at University of California, Irvine. And I'll probably say this again, I think DH is best when done in community. So I knew I wanted to focus on having an institute dedicated to Black digital humanities and digital ethnic studies. And I was able to connect with Dr. Zoe Borofsky at UCLA, the digital scholarship librarian at UCLA. And she was working on a Black DH project at the time, and she still is, with a faculty member there. And Zoe's well connected in the DH community. And UCLA has a strong team and decent infrastructure. And so we invited a few other people at UCLA and then at some other institutions across California to partner on the Institute. And we wanted to open it up to whoever was interested in Black studies, in digital humanities, and or in California studies in order to help build community around those areas. So Cali DHRI took place last spring. Our inaugural Cali DHRI took place last spring. And it was completely free, and it's meant to be an annual Digital Ethics Studies Institute. And our inaugural theme focused on the Black press, and we looked at California-centered data sets. We had 3 keynote speakers over the course of 3 days. All of those keynotes are recorded, and you can see them on our YouTube. I can also, when I have a moment, add some of the links to the chat, which it's helpful when you're talking about things that have occurred. And our keynote speakers highlighted their own Black digital humanities research projects. They focused on kind of the origin behind them, who they collaborated with, and their goals for the future of the project. And it's something that I'm hoping to continue, even though I'm no longer in California, and several of my collaborators are no longer in California. But we feel like it's something that we can probably continue to do.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Maybe we could think about how DEFCon can, help support that work as well, because, I was listening to you talk and I was thinking, I know that you are on the board of Reviews in Digital Humanities, which is the journal that I run with Jennifer Giuliano, who clearly was involved in the digital NAIS, as you mentioned, and ran HILT, of course. And it struck me sort of, our careers and our trajectories have sort of moved in these like interesting ways where they've sort of intersected, but not really directly. And it's just, and I've long admired your work. So just the opportunity to sit down and chat with you about it is fantastic. So thank you. But absolutely would love to think about leveraging Cali, DHRI, DEFCon, and also my lab at Dartmouth, and see what we can do to just generally build up capacity. We've also, California and the Cal states for DEFCon have really sort of used the resources that we've been able to get from Mellon to try and build some community, and are, I think, collectively applying for some of our funding this year. And so any California connections we can make too is fantastic. Let's go on to actually, India had a question. India, would you like to unmute and ask, or I can just ask it for you?
Yeah, I was just wondering if Tatiana had worked on any projects related to African American literature. That's my field. I'm at Ramapo College, where I'm an assistant professor of African American literature, and I'm just trying to think of ways that, I might be able to incorporate digital humanities into my own research and into my teaching as well. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. I haven't worked with any projects focused on literature. I would say that most of my collaborations have been with faculty in history, and art history and anthropology. This is so I could start to name a few projects that really come to mind that are doing interesting work, like the Black Bibliography Project. That's something to definitely get to know if you aren't familiar with it already. I also invite anyone to send me an email, and I can think through some of these questions a bit more, and also like offer some resources and support. So that's like my librarian pitch there. So in the past few years, projects I've worked on at University of California, Irvine in particular, some of them focused on building digital exhibitions. Some of them focused on developing oral history collections. Some of them focused on some connection between both of those things, digital exhibitions and generating oral history. Yeah, so I can go into a bit more detail about those, but not literature specifically.
Yeah, thanks so much. That's very helpful. I'll email you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that generous offer. I put a couple of links in the chat. Joanne Wu, who's at Lorain County Community College, was a DEFCon fellow last year and developed an Intro to Black Digital Humanities course, which is in English. So I've put a link to the landing page for that. It seems like the actual Scalar course page is password protected, but if you email Joanne, she's wonderful and generous and very fast on email, and I'm sure she'd be happy to give you access. So you could just tell her I sent you. And then also Mary Rizzo at, I believe at Rutgers Newark, I believe, or Rutgers Camden maybe, has a syllabus on Black digital humanities, and some of there's some of some of Howard Ramsby's work on geocoding Black short stories on there. So there's some resources there to look at as well. The other thing is, India, I'm not sure what kind of institution you're at, but if you are at one that falls under our teaching fellowships, consider applying because, oh, you said you're at Ramapo, so you absolutely are eligible to apply for one of our teaching fellowships because you don't need experience in digital humanities necessarily. You can be super new to it, and that's why we have the mentorship component of the grant. So every teaching fellow gets a mentor, and the mentor navigate. So consider that, please. We have another question. Lourdes, would you like to unmute and ask, or I can ask your question for you? It's up to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the conversation. I guess I'm a newbie to digital humanities in general. It's not that I teach digital journalism, so I'm not, I'm familiar with the digital world, but I guess I don't fully have a full grasp of what digital humanities can do. And so I do research in Latinx media, mostly news media. And so I would like to engage my students in more projects, but I guess what I need to start is more ideas about, how to engage them with digital humanities. And I heard Tatiana saying that she worked with the Black Press. So did you, if you could elaborate with that, did you build a like an archive or something like that, or what is it that you work with? And thank you for taking the time to answer my question.
Oh, sure. Thanks for asking it. So for CADHRI, we focus on the Black press. I'm searching while talking, so let me finish speaking first. We focus on the Black press thematically. And one of the exercises we did focused on mapping the Green Book, so looking at locations in California and generating and using GIS to map out locations across California. So the process of thinking about what questions to ask around that particular data set and thinking about the time period that the Green Book was published. That's one way we thought about the Black press. We also got a data set of a Black newspaper, a historic Black newspaper, and we walked through text analysis to how we would ask questions of that particular data set that would improve or increase our understanding of the Black community at that time, particularly the audience that would read that particular newspaper. So those were some kind of, they were designed to be kind of like lightweight tutorials that we could walk through people with people who had like little experience working with digital tools. And some of those resources are available on the site. And then we also have on kind of like the back end of the site, we have a community, because it's hosted on H Commons, that you can also join and see more of those resources if you'd like.
That's fantastic. I tried to find the Mapping the Green Book, but turns out there's a lot of projects mapping the Green Book, so I wasn't able to figure out which is the right link.
The Schomburg has a great collection, and they're doing a project around that. Yeah. As well as Library of Congress.
I mean, I love how, these kinds of projects just show what's really possible in Black studies and digital humanities. I mean, I posted a link to the Black Press Research Collective, which is run by Kim Gallen, has been doing some work as well on the Black press. I also mentioned that Joanne Wu, who I shared her landing page for her syllabus earlier, is doing a project on the Black press in Ohio with students, and would be a great person to talk to as well. One of the things is when we launched our fellowships last year, we only did teaching fellowships, and we had people coming from all kinds of disciplines. We had people from communications and journalism and public relations, and people who hadn't necessarily identified as digital humanities or weren't really sure, is this for me or does this relate to my work? But it's really, we define digital humanities very broadly in the DEFCon community, really think about the ways that humanities and technology intersect, the way we can use digital tools in our teaching in the context of the humanities to promote students, digital literacy and greater understanding of the relationship between race and technology and how we communicate with each other. So we define our work really, really broadly and support all kinds of interventions in digital humanities. So of course you can continue to post. Thank you for these questions, India and Lourdes. We're happy to have more questions. I'll move on to another question in the meantime while seeing if any come up. Tatiana, I'm really interested. I've done a lot of work on open educational resources when I was at Salem State. University, I launched with my colleague who's the dean of the library and our colleague who's vice president of something in IT. We launched an OER initiative, Open Educational Resources, with the goal of lowering the costs of textbooks for our students. It was really successful. It seems to be continuing today at Salem State, which is exciting. And I'm hoping to work with Amy Earhart, who's at Texas A&M, and some others, and put together a team who'd be interested in doing an OER, actually relevant to India's question for African-American lit. So India, if that's something you'd be interested in participating in, let me know. But I know that you've done a lot of work on OER for ethnic studies, Tatiana. And I think that's an important overlap with digital humanities, for sure. So I'd love to hear about what you've been doing with OER.
Sure. I'll say that from the first two audience questions, I have like a lot of things running through my mind, and I'll make sure to connect with everyone who asked with some follow-up resources, including there was a great DH press workshop last spring after Cali DHRI that took place, I think at Princeton and Penn, and Penn State. But so yeah, this question, I appreciate it. And I was a little bit surprised to see it on your list of questions. But yeah, I do think that there's overlap. And I also have always appreciated this like undercurrent of people publishing about DH or publishing DH monographs and having them be open, because I think that really helps build community and have people kind of learn on their own and at their own pace. So I've always appreciated that. So my interest in OER again stemmed, well, it stemmed from my my kind of functional work as a librarian, and my interest in supporting open initiatives, so open access, open data, open government, and open education. I generated an interest kind of along the same lines as I did with DH, starting at NYU libraries, and thinking about support in the field and then across higher education for open initiatives. I did some consulting work for faculty who were interested in publishing OA or transitioning their courses to zero-cost courses, and adapting existing open educational resources or creating their own. And along the same lines with self-study and attending conferences and joining, connecting with people on campus who are interested in the same things, I gained a greater understanding of it. Most recently, in 2021, I became a BBQ Plus fellow. So BBQ Plus is a Center for Black, Brown, and Queer Studies. And it's an independent center. They support grad students, librarians, postdocs, and early career faculty who do ethnic and queer studies. Through that fellowship, my cohort and I created multiple audio OER series. So we kind of pulled from public domain and resources that were made open or that we created ourselves to develop a series of shorts, of audio shorts, and we made them freely available online. And all of the shorts center ethnic studies and queer studies. So there's a really active OER community. So if you're interested in OER, you don't feel like you have to do it on your own. You don't have to go at it alone. Spark was really helpful as an organization. I was a Spark fellow at the OpenCon in 2017. I was an open education fellow. open educational fellow a couple of years later, and they have their annual open ed conference. So there are plenty of places to learn and get support if you're interested in adapting or creating OER. There's oftentimes a fair amount of support for OER at the institutional level. I found that there are faculty who are doing OER and they don't realize it. So they don't have a name for it. They just know that they're, you know, pulling free things together for their students, that they don't have to pay for textbooks or other materials. Whether that is open, whether that's truly open or not is the question. But there's definitely, I think, interest there on our own campuses, even if we don't realize it, because we're not giving it that particular designation. Connecting with librarians at your institution, really thinking about, so I'll go back and say one of the things I've done over the past few years is collaborate with ethnic studies librarians across. This was something that started when I was at University of California, Irvine. I connected with ethnic studies librarians at the UCs, Melissa Stoner and Sina Jensen, to do a study on the feasibility of creating ethnic studies OER in a sustainable way. And one thing that we found from that is that it's really important for faculty to think about OER, to discuss it, to have active conversations in your department and on your campus, and then also in your field about how you value OER and how you value the work that it takes to create it. There's a real tension around whether it should be considered service work or scholarship. So that's a crucial conversation to have, and it has to be like an internal one in order for there to really be any momentum around OER creation at the campus level. So that's where my interest in OER began to develop. And I go into the study in more depth. I was invited to do a keynote at Portland State University in early 2022 during OER week, which was in March. So that is available online if you want to search for that and add it to the chat.
You know, Tatiana, if you think of any links that you want to share after the fact, you can email them to me. We have a resource page on our website, and I would love to post them there. No pressure at all, because I did not ask you that in advance. But I know it's hard to sort of be trying to come up with links while you're talking. You know, it's funny. I hadn't really thought of that question being out of left field, but I guess you're absolutely right that it is. But you know, I was at Salem State for 9 years and started and ran our OER initiative with my colleagues for 4 of those. And one of the things I figured out was that even though we had no money for anything, our provost was willing to find money for OER because it had such a big impact on our students, and making the argument for things that really directly affect student success. You can get student life on board. You can get, you know, academic affairs on board. And so what we ended up doing was we basically ended up with a pot of money and gave people money and also support and mentorship to take a course that they were already teaching and adopt OER for it. And we just have really just always had people applying, you know, they were just $500. It wasn't a lot of money, but it really made a difference. And I mean, within our first year, we realized the savings of $2 million. And by the time I left, like, we realized a saving of like $6 million a year for our students. It was, you know, kind of unbelievable, and just really, really exciting. So,
yeah, that's a great point. If there isn't infrastructure there at your campus to support it, reaching out to whoever does educational technology on your campus or instructional design, reaching out to the library. One of the last projects I worked on at University of California, Irvine, I can start saying UC Irvine for short, was a stipend, an award for faculty who were interested in adopting OER for their courses or creating OER. And the award size varied based on the amount of work that they were going to do. This is, if you're interested in creating OER, there's plenty to negotiate for financial support and time. So that might be a course release, that might be funding for copy editing or graphic design. If you're interested in learning more, you can always join listservs within your own field, your own professional associations. I would ask those questions: who's creating OER, and can you do peer review for whatever they create? And that's a way of, I think, strengthening it within, at the campus level and then within our fields.
Those are such wonderful suggestions. Let's see. Not seeing any other questions, so I'm just going to keep asking you things I want to know. I'd love to hear about that first year seminar, because I know the kinds of institutions that many of our members are part of, first year seminars are a really key part of general education curriculum, and are often an opportunity to teach something that you don't necessarily get the opportunity to teach in another course. That was really my experience at Salem State. Those classes were the ones where I'm like, oh, as long as I do the student success study skills piece that's part of the course, or the kind of intro to college piece of the course, you can do whatever you want in terms of content usually. So I'd love to hear about how that went and what you did in the course.
So that was a really exciting opportunity for me. I had initially developed the idea of teaching a Black digital humanities course. Like I mentioned, I wanted to do it at the grad level, likely through an LIS program. And then when I was offered the opportunity to teach a first year seminar, it just made sense for me to adapt. And that was actually harder than I thought it would be. For a number of reasons. So I taught that course 3 times at a private university, which is a PWI. And I really count myself lucky that the students who signed up for it over the years were largely students of color at my university. So my course then became, I think, one of the only courses, or the only course on campus with that particular demographic. And that was, I think it was exciting for me. And I think it was also for the students to kind of have that space, especially as first year students. I found that, so I surveyed my students around their knowledge of Black studies and of digital tools coming into the course. And I found that regardless of their background and regardless of what they said, they were all really starting from zero when it came to having any kind of prior knowledge about Black studies or about digital humanities or digital tools. So I really had to adapt and think about cognitive load. So learning about history that they never known of, that they never realized before, beyond kind of a surface level, and then also thinking about the cognitive load of learning about digital methods and tools, and what they could be used for. And I think, yeah, I presented a couple of lightning talks about that course. And I can also, that might actually be available somewhere online, I don't know. But yeah, it was fantastic. I would actually, it was definitely a learning experience for me. It wasn't it was my first time doing a first year experience. I had taught previously And I've also taught in another capacity for, I've taught global studies, but it was a learning experience for me. And I actually I've been thinking about this in the back of my head, about just looking at that syllabus again and teaching it at the grad level, going back to my intention and for it originally and what I could do with it. Because I think it probably works best at that level.
What kinds of activities were you doing with students?
So I really wanted to grow their knowledge around Black studies, and that took going on a number of field trips. So we went to the Schomburg Center and we learned about the collections there, and they were able to follow their interests when they were coming up with their own research projects through the collections there. We went to Weeksville, and that also helped them learn more about the Black community in New York historically and up to a certain decade of the 60s at least. It helped them make connections, and that university was based in New York. So it was another kind of something I learned, how few students, even if they grew up in New York, had very little connection to New York City. So I think the students appreciated that. We also did a number of things, and like looking back at it, even though I taught it 3 times and each time we did less and less things each semester as I learned more and more about cognitive load and what the students needed, and was able to adapt also to what was going on, like COVID. I had, oh gosh, we did a lot of things. So we did some film analysis, we did some text analysis of James Baldwin. We did some review of existing DH projects and looked at, we asked some questions about how those projects were created, and we thought through how we might want to create our own projects. Oh gosh, I would have to pull up my syllabus. That's going to be probably about 30 seconds. But we did a lot, and I think in hindsight, maybe we did too much.
Yeah, we've all been there. A lot of our questions have been sort of about teaching and more faculty things. So I'd love to, we have we have 9 minutes. So if you have any questions, this is your time, but let me ask you a question. For our librarians in the community, what kind of advice do you have for librarians who may be interested in building or growing digital humanities initiatives on their campus, or maybe they already have them, but they want to bring in a stronger, ethnic studies component to the work? What kind of advice would you have for them?
I'll tackle that question, but I also want to highlight, and this connects to one of the earlier questions about literature, and some of the things I did with my students. Looking at social annotation tools would be great for reading in community with each other. And then also looking at some of the existing projects that let you crowdsource, whether it's metadata creation, whether it's transcription. Library of Congress has a number of great ones that are ongoing. Those are some other things to consider. So how to get started? Well, when I think about how to get started with teaching, I would reiterate, start with small assignments. I would emphasize that you should be able to complete the assignments yourself before you assign them. Just as a way of foolproofing what it is you expect your students to learn, I would say don't be afraid to try and fail in the classroom. And I would invite you to bring in librarians or library staff or others with technical skills as co-teachers throughout the semester around particular assignments. When it comes to partnering with professionals in the library, when it comes to teaching and research, I would emphasize that so people who work at your institution who don't have faculty status, they have a different set of constraints. So understanding their capacity to contribute ebbs and flows during the academic year, just like your capacity to contribute does. They oftentimes have to negotiate time that they and labor that they would contribute to your project, you know, within the library, with their supervisors, within their own organization. And so it's really key to give credit and to think through how you can think through how your collaborators can receive credit or funding as collaborators or co-authors, et cetera. So how can you kind of counter that tendency for people who oftentimes may not have their contributions be visible, how you can kind of counter that in your own partnerships. It's also really important for librarians and library staff, technologists, to be able to have their contributions be legible in their evaluations and whatever kind of promotion they're up for at the institution in their dossiers. And so thinking through that kind of that impact on their work and what they can get out of it as a partner, I think is key. I think as far as self-study, it's important to carve out time. It's, you know, you have to think about what you can negotiate for. Maybe if you put together a community of those interested on your campus in DH, maybe you can negotiate like something like a course release for the conveners, maybe funding for or time with a grant writer on campus to get support for projects that you're interested in pursuing, dedicated funding for a developer or designer, in case your institution or your library doesn't have the capacity to do that internally, because, you know, IT staff on campus may not have the time or the freedom to pursue that kind of project. And then funding and time. I think time is the most important thing for staff and students to attend DH trainings. Many of them are offered online. And I think that any kind of DH work you do on campus, you need consistent and tangible support for it. And that's why I think it works best when it's done in community, and you can connect with other people who are interested in it. I think that there's also sometimes at your university, there might be a distinction between people who are interested in DH and people who are interested in using DH for their own research. So they don't identify as digital humanists, but they're interested in using particular tools and methods for their own ends. So being able to think about it like in a big tent way is helpful, so that you're not like evangelizing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And I'll just take the moderator privilege and ask the last question, which is, I mean, I really appreciate that you've shed light on some of the tensions around collaborating across faculty and librarian and staff. And of course, some librarians are faculty. I I'm curious if you have any words for our librarians, because we do have librarians in our community, how they can, approach this work, how they can protect themselves. Any strategies that you've found successful?
Yes, I think that it's important to like articulate your interest for yourself. There are, people who are humanities librarians or digital scholarship librarians, and they're not interested in DH, or they are expert in things other than DH. And so it's important to kind of articulate that for yourself, and like really know what kind of role you want to fulfill if you're asked to, or if you're connected to a project. Maybe it's advice, maybe it's supervising like student workers or fellows or interns who are connected with the project. Maybe it's project management. Yeah, I think protecting your time is key, because we all work at institutions that are strapped for time, or strapped for funding, or strapped for staffing. I find MOUs to be really useful. So articulating responsibilities of each partner, what the goals are, when something will end, how something will be sunsetted is key for library partners when working with faculty. And then it's also helpful for that to be the starting place for real project management, and a place that, and having an idea of having a place for the institutional knowledge around that project, because people come and go. Sometimes projects stay, and sometimes they leave. People retire. So what to do with this work when all's said and done? And an MOU can go a long way in having everyone understand that and manage their expectations.
That's amazing advice. I've really had success with that as well, both as a faculty person, as sort of as somebody who's often ends up sort of helping people in a different kind of way. Well, we're at 2:00, so I just want to say thank you so much. This was so much fun. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to talk to you. I'm so appreciative that you've shared your expertise with our community. So thank you. Thanks to all of you for being here today. We hope you have some time over the holidays to get some rest, hopefully. And we'll see you in the new year.